Hello, I'm Alex from Bareface, and I'd like to talk to you about how this really awesome speaker cab came about. This is a barefaced super compact. It is a paragon of minimalism. It is everything you need and nothing you don't in a bass cab, if you are the right variety of you when it comes to playing bass. And what I wanted to achieve with this was sufficient output for pretty loud gigs, great tone, real honesty, but we didn't need to go super low and we didn't need to go super high. I just wanted the kind of essence of bass guitar, as works for a lot of bassists, would come out from this speaker. And I have one of these speakers here. This is our own design. We designed this with eminence, the excellent Jerry McNutt, who was their chief engineer at the time. He's got a more posh senior title now. He's kind of in charge of bigger things, but he's still kind of head speaker nut at Eminence. He's been there for a long time and he really knows how to design guitar, bass and PA, pro audio, loudspeakers. He's an excellent chap. And this speaker design came from trying to, like I said, get the sound that you want with none of the stuff you don't need. Now, what do we need in a bass cab and what don't we need? Well, if we look at the core bass cabs over the decades, the ones that have become industry standards, there's one that has became an industry standard and has stayed the industry standard, and there's others that sort of come in and out. So there was the folded horn acoustic 360, 361, single 18. That was around because it was loud. There was the Ampeg 810 that went under the SVT, sealed 810. And then we had SWR coming in with like the Goliath. There was Eden, Trace Elliott, the sort of the 4x10 plus tweeter land. But I think we can safely say that the one consistent since 1969 has been the Ampeg SVT 810, and I've drawn a graph here. So this line here, more sloping line, is the lows on SVT 810, and then we go through the mids, and then the highs roll off. And basically an SVT starts rolling off a bit above 100 Hertz and rolls off with quite a gradual slope. It's about 6 dB down, it's about 60 Hertz, and it's about 18 dB down at 30 Hertz, which sounds like a lot. And it is a lot, but it's what works for how bass guitars are meant to sound in context. Remember, you have EQ on your amp, you might also have EQ on your bass, you might have pedals with EQ, but you can reshape that curve to a degree. The 810 is popular because it's got all the bits of sound you need. Yeah, it's not the cleanest thing in the world, but it doesn't have massive holes in response. You know, they vary quite a bit, but on the whole, there's a consistency in that there aren't big gaps in the sound. They go low enough and roll off in a way that works well in the real world of bands and acoustics of rooms and things like that. And they roll off at the highs in a place that works for a lot of bassists. And yes, there are plenty of bassists out there that will want more highs, and that's why we have tweeters or mid-range drivers and things like that. That's why we have different sounding cabs. But there are a lot of bassists out there for whom the top end off the 10-inch speakers in an 810 works well for them. And particularly if they can stand in the right place relative to it, because it is really quite a directional cab. But it's a big cab, it's 4 foot high. You can stand a short distance from it, sort of in line, and you are fairly close to on axis with the speakers, and that makes a big difference in terms of hearing the highs from one of those 810s, because once you get off axis, they are rolling off a lot more radically. They're quite a lot. They start rolling off at around 1,000 Hertz due to the width of the array and the height of the array, and then there's also the roll off due to the width of the speakers themselves and the pistonic behaviour. And then that compounds with the natural roll-off due to the inductance of the speaker at higher frequencies. So I knew that if I could make a speaker that could reach low enough, like that does, and could reach high enough like that does, then without holes, gaps, whatever annoyances in the response, then we would make a lot of bassists happy, especially if it had a lot of output, which is for another video. But here we're going to talk about bandwidth. And we can't talk about bandwidth and frequency response without worrying about polar response. So that's this issue with the fact that these cabs roll off. Speakers roll off as you move off to the side. So on axis, you've got more treble and head off to the side, so like the speaker pointing in a different direction, and you've got less treble and obviously far less when you're behind it. And you've heard that. If you haven't noticed this, please make an effort to go and stand behind some speakers and in front of some speakers and off to the side and listen to how they change. And particularly if you get a chance to do that with some big speakers versus some small speakers, you'll notice the differences are much more apparent with large speakers because a large wave source is more directional. So large source of wave relative to the wavelength of the wave. So what I wanted to do with this speaker, and I should say, super compact is half of a super twin. So the idea behind the super twin and the super compact is that the super compact is if you need this much output, so it's not one 12-inch worth of output. These 12XN drivers have a huge amount of output, but that, as I said, that's for another video. The super twin 212 version of this, 2x12XN, has similar output to an 810, similar output to a really powerful ported 410. It's a very loud cab, so as I said, we'll deal with that and explain how we achieve that in another video. But it's a modular thing. There is no drastic difference in tone. If you want a modular version, you can have two of these. So that's two super compacts equals one super twin, or you can have one cab, super twin, that does it all. But for a lot of bassists, one super compact will have enough output. I've got it standing up here so you can see it in the video. Don't do that with it. Put it on the ground or put it pretty close to the ground because you want the boundary reinforcement of the floor, and the speaker's been designed with good dispersion, so you don't need to have it right up by your ears. So that's this thing. There's the special stuff going on with this cone so that at low frequencies it's a big powerful piston moving lots of air back and forth. But as we get up into the mids and to higher frequencies, the cone's radiating area starts to shrink to allow the dispersion to widen. And then we also get a lot of radiating sound off this dust cap here that's directly coupled to the voice coil former. So yeah, that's the sort of step one of thinking about the super compact and super twin pair, that it was about a driver that goes low enough and goes high enough and doesn't have any holes in the mid-range or treble or anywhere, doesn't have excessive humps anywhere. You know, it's really a very honest representation of your sound, but bandwidth limited, high up and low down, in a way that makes most bassists very happy. It's honest, but it's a nice way of being honest. It's getting rid of the rubbish at the top and the bottom that you don't want to hear, and it's generating a lot of output that sits in the right place in the mix. And most importantly, it has consistent tone as you move around the room because it has this good polar response, this broad dispersion around the room. So yeah, bandwidth, 12XN, step one of the development of the Super Twin and Super Compact. We had to get that right. I shall be back with part 2 later. Thank you. Goodbye.